guess from a risk point of view, as the company grows, we will probably separate out those little mini operating divisions in different areas, because the problem is one bad contract in construction could take out the whole group.
Yeah. So I'm Matthew Cox and I'm a business strategist. I've run and grown multiple businesses over the last 15 or so years. Join me on my journey with helping other entrepreneurs figure out what their goals are, how to set them and how to achieve them. So we're now going to get stuck into the podcast. Grab yourself a coffee, put your headphones in, go for a walk the dog around the field, whatever it is you want to do. I really hope you enjoy this and you can glean some useful content for us as I help this owner figure out their strategy and reach their goals. So we've got our guest on today, Tom, and he's got some big plans for his business. He wants to acquire businesses, he wants to grow them, he wants to really accelerate his group of companies to the next level. But is he spending too much time working on the business and not actually focusing on getting those acquisitions and merging them in with his business? So today we're going to meet with Tom and we're going to find out a little bit more about what his goals are and what his troubles are in reaching them. So welcome everybody. We've got our guest Tom Lever today from Orange Property Group. He's going to be here talking to us about his kind of goal setting and how he's going to get there and his troubles that maybe he foresees to getting there. But one of the things I like to start the podcast with, Tom, it's a bit of a tricky a question for some people. Let's have a little bit about what was Tom like at school?
What was
young Tom like?
I was relatively bright and very mischievous, which is probably not a great combination in a school setting. So I used to hate sitting in classes and I used to get very bored. So I used to pull tricks like climbing out the back of the window, climbing down the side of the building and coming back in and knocking to join class halfway through, whilst doing relatively okay in the exams at the end. So I was a good student, but the naughty one.
Yes,
naughty,
mischievous.
Liked by teachers, but mischievous. So,
what about your kind of teenage years, going through to college, that sort of thing?
I worked really hard. I mean, I worked obviously to do well at school, but I had my first job before I was 12, and really that kind of set off my business life. From the age of 12, I started kind of working at a pot washer and then worked my way up in this events company, which has really kind of set my career off, and it's built this work ethos that I think really is one of the big driving factors about where I've got to now. So, I mean, I had a lot of hobbies, really into drama and theatre, but I think I was born to be a hard worker. My mum is an incredibly hard worker, and I had an amazing influence from this lady that ran the catering company that I worked for, and she's become sort of like family. And her work ethic has also rubbed off into me. So, I worked all the time as a hard worker, and that's not stopped.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing for anyone in the kind of entrepreneurial type space is that, anyone that leaves a job, PAYE job, to set up their own business thinking, it's going to be full of golf days and relaxing and taking a bit of time off. You do get that flexibility, but it is literally non-stop. You're probably going to be working more than 9 till 5 almost all the time.
Absolutely, I can agree more. And I think, where I am now is like seas and continents away from where I started. And now it is much more possible to take time away from the business. But I just had an extended amount of time off. And even then, you're on the phone every day because ultimately, I'm at the stage of I run a company, but I'm not an investor. If you're an investor, I guess you could take a step back, but ultimately I am the ultimate decision maker in lots of processes. So I've always had a hard work ethic and always hated things that were inefficient and wanted to change them.
Okay.
And that sort of got me to where I am.
Yeah. So where did you go from that kind of like school, the pot washing and all the rest of it? How did you get into the property, building industry, maintenance, whatever you can tell us a bit more about the business in a minute, but the journey from there to the start of Orange Property Group?
Very eclectic. I've always had like an academic theme in my life.
Yeah. And
the school theme ran through. I did started a degree in biomedical chemistry and then went on to do medicine. I'm a qualified doctor and now a GP. and still have that sort of academic element to my life. I work as little as I can in the NHS, but I have that little theme. So every week I do a little bit of that. At the same time, from school, I was working in this events and catering company, and I worked my way up from being pot washer to running weddings and things, but really got quite involved in the business side of things and was very good at kind of spotting how to make things more profitable and what was frustrating and systems and processes and things like that. And from there, I went and did ski season abroad and then met another great contact and then started previous business, which was in a kind of experiential marketing events company.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I grew that, I sold that, and then got into property developing.
Yeah.
And from property developing, I was just fed up with the quality of contractors, and that really is what me led to start Orange Property, because I just thought this is ridiculous. If no one can turn up on time, no one can answer the phone. Everyone, I was developing a house by the station into 3 flats, and there wasn't a single person on site that worked for the company that I'd employed and given the job to.
Yeah.
Everyone was subcontracted and subcontracted. And I thought, well, I'll start a company, and even if I service my own needs as a developer and my portfolio, then that's great. But actually from there it went boom. And that's sort of where Orange started.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us a bit more about Orange then. So you're primarily in the southeast. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we generally say to clients, we cover Sussex, which is obviously a vast area, but we cover south of London and sort of from Eastbourne through to Chichester. And we're a full services building contractor. And our kind of core services are construction, and there's lots of different types of construction we do. Yeah. Maintenance and property services. And again, our kind of key clients are letting agents, block managers, that sort of thing. We do passive fire work, so fire doors and stuff like that, and then development as well. Yeah. And where we sort of fit within the market is we offer a premium service. That's not saying everything we do is expensive marble and alabaster. Yeah. We answer the phones. We send people on time. We believe in employing people. We believe in kind of growing and nurturing talent from the ground up. So trying to build a culture of caring about work and caring about what we do is sort of where we come from.
Okay.
So that's a little bit about where Orange sits in the market.
Okay. And how long has it been going for?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah,
okay.
Just coming up to.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And in terms of staffing levels and the rest of it, what have you got to?
So we're about 20, just under 20 headcounts,
okay.
Of which is made up about 5 in the office, and then the guys on the tools, and then we have our regular subcontractors, which grows it from there.
Yeah. And what do you do with your time in the day in the business? How's that kind of split out?
So I've really tried to delegate and systemize as much as possible. So by and large now I spend my time kind of running the company. So I have finance meetings, doing business development, overseeing the project managers, overseeing our maintenance manager, but I don't really get involved in the individual jobs anymore, or most of our clients right now wouldn't necessarily put my name or face to the front of the company. Yeah. So that's taken an enormous amount of hard work.
Yeah. So you have a kind of foreman and then like a business development manager, or is that still yourself?
I still do most of the business development, but we have John Beasley, who is, to be fair, way more qualified, superior, chartered by the Royal College in London, heads up our construction side of the business, and he manages all of those kind of elements, estimators, and we have office team. So I'm still very heavily involved, but much more with the running of the company than the day-to-day jobs.
Yeah. And how much time do you spend between running the company and doing business development, as in like operating and growing? What's the split between that?
I would probably say 30% business development nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, a considerable amount of my time.
It's operational stuff.
No, it's probably 60-70% operational.
Okay,
30% of it, I'm probably doing business development, 30-40%.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I probably spend a day a week. Yeah. And I'm not in the business full time. So, probably a third of my time.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So just moving on, obviously we asked some questions about what your kind of goals are and strategy and the rest of it. So your year one goal was to continue growth, continue implementation of policies, procedures for automation, functioning, redesign and rebrand of the Orange and its subsidiaries. And then contracts over £1 million acquired. So talk me through the rebrand and the redesign. What's that behind that?
Well, we've come a long way from where I started, and ultimately, Orange Property is now a little group of those little different subsectors that I talked about, whether it be construction, maintenance, property services, fire. We just need to clarify that and make sure the message is right for our different customers. Indeed, a client that contacts us for a £500,000 extension wants completely different information and has kind of different problems that they want to solving compared to a block management company who are looking for tenders to be filled in. And so we're still going through a rebrand, partly because we want to clarify that message, and partly because I think the logo that we started with is something that we knocked up, and it doesn't quite represent where we are now. So we're doing that, and that's sort of a.
So we're not talking kind of like a complete rebrand. You're not moving away from the kind of Orange Property Group theme, if you like. It's more a case of like changing the logo and things like that.
Our colours and name are staying the same. It's more a refinement and remarketing ourselves, really. So.
Okay. I think that's good. I was a little bit worried that you were going to go for the kind of complete rebrand thing or something. I think a lot of people feel like that. They get itchy feet after about 5-6 years and they're like, oh, maybe I should do this because it's not working. But you've got so much traction and Google Analytics and all the rest of it that's behind that up to that point. It's well worth rebranding, as in redesigning the brand, whether you change the logo slightly. I mean, we haven't changed our logo in 15 years, but actually it has changed a little bit. It's got sharper around the edges. There's been tweaks and the rest of it for Charles Scott's. And then underneath what we've written is like property management, lettings, whatever. So each department's got its kind of own variation of the logo, essentially.
That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah. And like I say, part of it's not just about amending our logo. It's about sorting out our messaging to clients.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think it's key if you can, like, we're a bit like us where we do lots of different property related stuff. If your logo is strong on in its own right, like ours is obviously that 2 C's, kind of handshaking together. That's what it was meant to be. Like as in we're working with the client, harmoniousness. But that logo itself, we've used that when we've acquired companies, and I think it's very useful to be like, okay, well, you've still got like the company name underneath, so the company hasn't changed, but then you've replaced their logo with our orange and blue logo, and therefore that makes the acquisition transition a little bit more tangible for people. They don't mind it so much because you haven't lost the name. It's just a bit of a logo change, and you can see it's got a nod towards it's part of a group. Because I know later on you talk about acquisitions, which we'll come on to. I think if you can get that logo designed so it's almost like a standalone thing. Like my vision was always like, when you see that CC logo, it's something to do with property. Like it's just a thing that we do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I really want to try and achieve is a simple logo, something that is easily recognisable. And we have lots of staff in uniforms because on the sites and so on, and we churn through uniforms because they get destroyed so quickly, as you can imagine. So, I've gone through all the embroidery bits and bobs, and actually having something that's simple, punchy, people can see. And actually, we are probably going to go with something, I sit here and look at your logo, that's got similar essences. We're going for a simple O, probably, that's got some movement to it. And
you look at anything like locally in the southeast, there's another agent who does commercial stuff, Oakley's, who you will know in Brighton. They just use yellow and purple. Pretty uninspiring colours if you just chose them off of a colour chart, but actually they're distinct, aren't they? No one else is using those colours, and they have that kind of O, and you recognise that, and that's Oakley's branding around here. And I think that's like a really powerful tool when you've got many different facets to your business, where you've got like different departments and the rest of it. If they can see that it's under one group, as well as the fact you've clear branding, that's quite a useful tool.
Absolutely, yeah. So, but I think I completely agree with everything you're saying.
So I think that's really fascinating. And definitely something we've tried to implement. So we'll move on to the kind of next question, which is more the meaty one, like the 3 to 5 year goal. We're aiming to acquire some small local maintenance, plumbing, electrical firms to allow the continued growth of us in the east, west and north neighbouring cities, creation of academy for talent and development, award-winning status for our approach to construction and maintenance, and committed to long and loyal staff. Obviously quite a lot there. And then to kind of look at the longer term plan after that, you're looking possibly for an exit at some point in the next 10, 15 years or so, through obviously branding or people buying you out through the business. The challenges that you've got is the talent acquisition, cash flow, and what you refer to as dead man shoes. Not too sure what you mean by dead man shoes, but
you've never heard that phrase.
I probably have heard of it, but maybe under a different thing. Yeah. So with the acquiring local businesses and the rest, what's the kind of strategy with that at the moment? You're kind of doing that, or you're looking to get into that space, or how?
Yeah, I think simply where I come from there is that there are a lot of businesses and smaller outfits that are doing a good job, but ultimately don't bring what I bring to the table, which is systemization, the business strategy and approach. And they come towards the end of their business career and they're fatigued and tired and looking for a way out. And I think you can acquire some businesses at very good value at that point, which is an easy growth strategy. One of the challenges in the kind of commercial space in which we operate, so working for block managers and so on, is the dead man shoes concept, which is that often they will use the same person until that man's dead, and then you can step into his shoes.
Yes.
And that's not, that person might not be perfect. They might be perfect, but ultimately it's sort of a queue system. And so doing acquisitions will help us to grow. And I'm not talking about buying enormous companies. I'm talking about buying little companies that will help that growth. And primarily, I guess you're acquiring clients and then streamlining and using our systems.
So I think the dead man shoes, I understand what you're saying with that now. So that's like your kind of, it's all about you scenario, which is actually one of the things I wanted to come on to with your acquisition and your growing. So personally, if to find those businesses, the small ones and the rest of it, I think I would spend more of my time doing that, because they're slow burners. Sometimes you have to plant seeds with people and then they might come back in 3 or 4 years' time. So if you're spending a lot of your time doing processes and operating the business, if you like that 70-30 split, I have like a day a week where I look for investment opportunities. Like literally I spend like the whole day just trawling the internet, whether that's development sites, other businesses, whatever, going on company's house and going like, I've found like a letting agent in Eastbourne and the owners are 65 and 62, husband and wife. I'm like, brilliant. They're really good business to buy. The issue that you have with those type businesses is the dead man shoes thing, as you have. So you buy that business and then you lose customers. So you either have to build that in, or you have to have a really good system yourself. Otherwise you get drawn into that business and then all of a sudden you've just replaced Susan and John because the clients want to see you because they're used to dealing with the owner. In an ideal world, I think you have the skill set personally and the way you come across to me and the fact that you're doing things differently to grow your business to a point via acquiring these, that you could actually look at much bigger firms that have already got a system in place. So a company like yours, where perhaps if you can get to the point where you are doing business development manager and strategizing and literally doing like 80% of that with your time and 20% of it just doing that, you then can aim for a company that's maybe similar size to yourself where that owner wants to exit or whatever. And those types of businesses are a lot easier to acquire and amalgamate because they're not so reliant upon the owner being in the business, the dead man's shoes syndrome. They have systems in place and the rest of it. The hard part I find with those type of businesses is getting the core values of your Orange Property Group to feed into the existing business, because they will have their kind of cultures and their abilities. So the due diligence will show, and don't just talk to the owner, like go down and talk to the management staff and the rest of it and see what they're like. So you don't end up buying a business that isn't really interchangeable with your own business.
Absolutely. I think I agree with most of that. And certainly I don't think I'd want to buy a business which is only the owner. I think that would be a very quick way to an early grave. But I think also if you're getting a lot of these businesses have been around a while. I mean, there are lots of businesses that are doing what we're doing in different areas that are a similar size, but they might have been going 30 years and are relying on old systems that require a lot of people. And I think that innovating that sort of process is key. So that's where that idea comes from anyway.
I mean, you must have competitors locally in the southeast that are that kind of 1 million to 1.5 million turnover, profit, EBITDA, whatever figures you're looking at, that are probably the owners are of a baby boomer generation, or maybe they're just looking to exit, or they're looking at a management buyout, but the staff can't raise the money. Ears to the ground and trying to find those businesses. Those are the sort of ones that I would go for. I think it's a really good way of building your immediate acquisitions, and by figuring out the kind of small plumbers and the electricians and the rest of it, like those smaller firms, but they are inherently difficult to get away from that dead man's shoes, as you refer. But they do tend to be quite easy to purchase. They are a lot easier to deal with. Like, they're easier to find because they've got no exit strategy. Their kids probably don't want to come into the business. It's husband and wife, and they're thinking, well, we've got like 5 members of staff and that's that. And they've got a really good client base done, exactly. And to move away from that to the next league up is really where I think that would be a good move for you, if you can maybe just get your business to a point where you can then start doing that. And although raising money to do acquisitions, if you're not using your own cash, I'd always try and avoid using your own cash, because you say like cash flow is an issue. So if you can borrow or get them to fund it, there are some really creative ways of getting people out of their businesses, like really not even using your own money, like just saying
sure, asset financing, anything in the existing business, or invoice financing,
or even better than that, vendor financing, where you can say to the owner, look, what I'll do is we'll buy your business, but I'm not going to pay you today. I'll pay you in a year's time based on the actual profits of what you've done, and I'll give you 50%. We'll keep you in the business. So maybe for the first year, it doesn't make any money for you, but you've acquired it. You've got it on your books. And then they'll be thinking, well, I'll get the value that I wanted, but I get it paid over like 3 years or whatever you've negotiated, and I get a salary, and I'm being exited out of the business slowly. So I'm not, it's not a turn off like day one, and then you suddenly lose that person that was the face of the business. They're always around in the background. So, and you can often, if you're clever enough, you can finance that basically through the seller, the vendor financing. So you don't even need to go and borrow the money. You just need to do the figures to make sure that it's sustainable what you're offering them. But it's also a good way of weaning out those skeletons in the closet. They're going to stay around. They're going to be a little bit more truthful. If you're just buying off of them and they won't tell you about the printer contract that they've signed for 12 years or whatever, or the fact that John's suing them because he hurt his leg or something.
Exactly.
All those things. Whereas if they're going to stick around for 3 years, they're probably going to declare that because they know it's going to come out at some point, and then it's going to affect the negotiation and whatever. And you can write that into the contract.
Exactly, yeah.
I just thought we'd come away from the podcast for a second. I just wanted to remind anybody that is looking to apply to come on the podcast, this isn't a formal show where we're kind of really diving down into all the numbers and we're grilling you left, right and centre. It's really just me talking with you, an open and frank conversation like two mates down the pub. Yes, I might say I would do something differently, and I might pose a little awkward question to you or whatever, but I'm not going to tell you what to do or how you should do it. I'm not going to jump down your throat if I think you're doing something wrong. It's just an open and frank conversation like two mates down the pub, having a chinwag, putting the worlds to rights, basically. So if that is up your street, please go to www.matthewcox.biz and apply to be on the show. Okay, so I think they're interesting points. One of the things that you mentioned in your kind of challenges, if you like, is the talent acquisition and also cash flow as well. So talk me through the kind of talent, the pain points with the talent acquisition.
So the construction industry as a whole has a whole load of challenges at the moment. one of the key ones is that over the past kind of couple of decades, there's been a big move towards managing and project management. And a lot of the people who are getting project managing construction sites now have never done construction themselves. Now, that probably works in a very, very large firm, a tier one contractor, where ultimately you're managing subcontractors who are excellent. When you scale that down a bit, it's harder, because if you've got no relatability as to how to do something, then it's difficult to manage people on the ground.
Yeah.
And so you've got these you do have managers who have maybe grown up from running their own firms or running a team, and then have become chartered or who are qualified, and they are great, and they're like gold dust. And as you grow in the firm, you could have other people who are more managers and less relatable. So that's hard. But also, I think that ultimately we've had a shortage in skilled construction workers in this country for a long time, because we're constantly building, housing shortage. And as such, I think that lots of skilled technicians and employees are they're kept in their roles because you'd be silly to lose them. So it's about trying to get that talent and making it attractive. And there's a range of ways to solve that. We're trying to grow it up through the company. We've got apprentices the whole time.
Yeah.
Nearly everyone in our company is in some form of training, one way or another. Yeah. That's one way, and we're trying to make it a great place to work. And that, construction, that's an easy win, because so many companies don't care at all in this industry. And so we really do, and we try and really build that culture internally, that it's a great place to work.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. That's how we're trying to.
Yeah, I think I would agree there. I mean, the kind of ground level workforce of any construction company does suffer with churn. That kind of demographic of people, they do tend to want to look around. They're very easily kind of like, oh, so and so is going to pay me more money, I'm going to go and work for them. It doesn't work out, then they're back again, and so on. I think that's just something that will always exist in that industry. But I do think when we touched on earlier about the acquisitions, I think if you can also strategically look for firms that have those type of people in them. We've bought businesses, not necessarily because they were profitable. In fact, some were losing money, but actually what we wanted to do was get the people that were running it involved with our existing business. So I won't name any names, but we purchased a business, which that person then came to work for us because they didn't want to run their own business anymore, but they actually have loads of skill set, which was really good for us. So we could feed them into the existing business whilst we're kind of taking out a competitor and expanding our portfolio. So acquisition doesn't necessarily always have to be solely about like kind of the monetary side, but looking for those team members that have been with those businesses and got those skill sets. So I don't know if that's something you look for when you're kind of looking around for the acquisitions.
I think you're absolutely right. I think finding excellent people who are already engaged in other businesses is part of the attraction of acquisition rather than growth. But perhaps putting them hand in hand and doing a bit of both at the same time is where we'll be.
Definitely. I think that if you can, your sweet spot would be a company that's got good contracts in place and the rest of it. And from the cash flow thing, which we'll come on to in a minute, ones that have got that kind of steady cash flow contracts and all the rest of it coming in, and they've got a really good management team that shares a core value and a culture that matches your existing one, then you're like, that is like almost worth maybe paying a little bit more than you wanted to for it, or having to put some of your own money on the line if it's going to be, a really, really good fit, as opposed to always try and do vendor financing and the rest of it. They're like low risk if you're worried about maybe the fit and the culture and what you're going to lose and the dead man's shoes syndrome. But if you really believe in it and you feel like that, this is going to be a good fit, then it's sometimes worth like maybe putting a little bit more skin in the game, especially if you're going to get those members of staff that are going to be really hard for you to find. The perfect ones, I think, in your industry are the ones that have worked their way up through the firms because they have that skill set. Because as much as you can do all your RICS qualifications and the rest of it, if you don't have, like our surveyors here are typically like that. Some of them do their own DIY and the rest of it, so they have some sympathy for contractors. But time and time I say again, straight out of university, go and do your RICS qualification, and they probably only ever put IKEA cabinets together. So they've got no real concept of actually, what it takes to get something done on site.
Spot on. And that comes back to the point that we briefly touched on about, in the industry, we've got lots of these professional managers that might not actually know what it's like to be on the ground.
Exactly.
And so finding those that sweet spot of people that have got experience in the actually on the ground bits, but also have the management experience and qualifications to be able to lead it. That's key.
Yeah.
It's really key.
Okay. Cash flow.
Yeah.
You mentioned that on your kind of challenges to reaching your goals.
The next business I start is going to be a business where someone pays before you do the service, which is not true in construction.
Yeah.
We'll often be working and planning a contract for months before we even get to site. And then, you're not going to put in your first invoice, or you'll put in an evaluation after a month, maybe 6 weeks. And then your surveyor might back a few things. So by the time they agree the invoice, it might be 8 weeks after you start, or that might be 16, 20 weeks after you started doing some planning. And then obviously you get your invoice in. So ultimately there are ways around that and systemize it. But you're always a little bit behind the cash flow bubble. So it is a challenge in that regard.
So a couple of things that you mentioned. One was the development side, which we'll come on to in a second, and then also kind of clearing up what different bits of the group are going to be. And I thought when we were having that conversation, I wanted to ask you, in terms of the development side of things, is that owned you personally, or you're doing that for clients, or is that part of the Orange Property Group or whatever? Or how does that kind of work? So you buy like a house and divide it into 3 flats, or you might buy a smelly cat wee property or something like that and refurbish it. What's the process with that?
I have a separate company which is called Green Property Group.
Yeah.
And
I
don't know what. No, I know.
Keep it simple.
But that holds my portfolio and does developments. Orange does developments for lots of developers, of which I happen to be one of. And so we've got experience not only in doing our own projects or projects for my other company, but also for other people. Yeah.
Why doesn't Orange have its own portfolio? Because that feeds cash flow into the business.
Yeah, well, I could probably think of a few reasons why.
Or not necessarily under the construction, but I'm just thinking from our point of view, we have our portfolio under Charles Cox Capital, which is just a subsidiary of Charles Cox.
Yeah.
That generates income. And then when we have like a cash flow, maybe there's a down period, because we're a different type of business. You get the block management and the letting fees from the fees you collect. So we don't have the similar cash flow, but obviously occasionally in those down periods in between where we get a lump sum and when we're not getting a lump sum, we might have a cash flow, not an issue, but we might start losing money and having to dip into reserve pots. It's very useful for us to have that property income that feeds into it because it's regular every single month.
Yeah, I mean,
I've got my own portfolio, but this is like the firm's portfolio, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I guess from a risk point of view, as the company grows, we will probably separate out those little mini operating divisions in different areas, because the problem is one bad contract in construction could take down the whole group.
Yeah.
And that's the reason at the moment why I haven't really fed any of the kind of property into it. It's just because of the risk. But you could isolate it and spread it out in a group structure, I guess. I think ultimately I started doing property developing before Orange was around, so I already had the different vehicle. So I think there's probably reasons for it and against it. But the reality is, you're absolutely right. Money comes from other companies through direct sale and goes into the other ones at periods that it needs to. And I think it would be very difficult in a smaller, younger company without having that cash flow that you can liquidly move.
Because if you're worried about one taking the other out or whatever, then I think having that group structure does give you a level of protection. But ultimately, they can trace back where the money's come from. Even so, like Charles Cox Capital isn't owned by our group, but if it loans money back and forth to the group and then it has a problem of itself, they can actually trace that back and go, well, actually, that money that you loaned back came from that company. So there is some mortgage companies will have like a vehicle for getting back to there. You'll never get truly away from it. But I think that if you do things in such a manner, you will massively reduce your risk. I mean, I don't know your kind of tenant profile, but we do a lot of work with Brighton and Hove Council where we rehouse people that are on the kind of at-risk register. So they're not like homeless or anything, but it's like the stage before. So maybe they've gone through a divorce and then they've needed to move out of the family home or whatever it is. And before they go into like a sheltered accommodation or Airbnb type stuff, then the council come through us and we rent directly to them. They pay the rent and the rest of it. And the risk factor for me is like the council going bust because the council are paying their rent. Most of these people annoyingly move on with their lives after about 4 years. So it's not as profitable as someone that stays there for, I don't know, 10 years or 15 years from a landlord's point of view, but it is guaranteed rent and that money comes in. So actually that side of the business is pretty regular. We don't really have any debtors because it's almost entirely funded by council payment. So like during COVID, for instance, we didn't have this kind of like, oh, is everyone going to lose their job, be furloughed and we're going to have problems? Because the council keep paying their rent.
Guaranteed,
and it's a very stable model that, and it allows us to be like, well, that's given us like, say the wages are like 50k, it gives us half of those wages done without us even having to worry about it. So from a cash flow point of view, I think those sort of things are quite invaluable, and I think it's good to have that property company outside of your group so that for tax reasons you might go, right, I'm going to sell Orange Group, my exit strategy in 15 years, but I'm going to hold on to the properties that we've developed, built and the rest of it.
Exactly.
It's part of the group. I don't think there's any issue doing that, but it does in that meantime helps feed the group money for its cash flow kind of issues and ups and downs.
It does, yeah.
And then the other thing I wondered, with your kind of, where you've got your kind of sort of main parent company, I suppose, and then you've got your sort of subsidiaries, would be if there's any sort of service type style packages in those, opportunities there. I'm thinking of electricians, plumbers and those sort of things, where they kind of sign up for these sort of boiler repair type things where the customer pays $29.99 a month and they know that they're going to come out and repair their boiler. I think that from my experience, those are really popular with plumbers, electricians and those sort of people, especially with landlords with electricians and their ECIRs and things like that. But of late, it seems like every plumber is trying to get into that market because they've kind of figured out that that's a good way of stabilising their business from a cash flow. I mean, British Gas and the likes have been doing it for years, but I think they get a bad rap because they're so big and then people go, well, they came out and they didn't repair my boiler and all that kind of stuff. So if you could fill that market as well, I think that would be a good cash flow.
I have thought about it an awful lot. I can show you. Hence one of the parts of acquiring electricians and gas registered plumbers. I don't know that the challenge to doing the British Gas model is that it's an insurance product. So if you are saying you're going to pay £30 a month and we'll do things with that, then that's insurance and you have to become regulated. The sexier and more interesting part is if you bundle things for landlords and you bundle an EICR, gas safe, gutter cleaning, all these kind of things into one monthly fee for a fixed range of products. That's where we're heading. And then if they need a call out or something breaks down, that's separate. Because then it's not an insurance, it's not a regulated product. Which is interesting. That's very much part of the property services plan. And the other thing that we have as a distinct advantage over a plumber or an electrician is not going to have a plan with the electrician, a plan with a plumber, a plan to have the windows cleaned and a plan to have it, you pay, you pick your services, one monthly fee, Orange take care of it.
And I think that's a definite USP if you can bundle all that stuff together to distinguish between having all those multiple policies. The amount of times you have like, oh, I've got cooker breakdown and I've got the boiler man and I've got and it's literally, and then something happens and you can't actually remember what cover you've got anymore or where the policies were. So I think that space would be really important to try and get into. It is a real slow burner and you have to kind of go do the networking, tromping around, going to the letting agents, upselling it, speaking to clients. And in my opinion, you're, a very nice, like you're well dressed and nicely spoken person to sell to landlords as opposed to your builders trying to sell that up. I think a lot of people get turned off by that because they're like, yeah, but you're just trying to get extra money out of me and so on. So you use your own USP as your business development manager thing, that you're not kind of that rough and ready style builder, and that you're going to package that together. And I think you do a really good job of that personally. And
the interesting about that is I think it's very scalable and very interesting if you're going to grow in area and so on. So it's very much part of our growth strategy. So
I think that would help you and also stabilise the business from the cash flow point of view, and then help with the EBITDA figures and stuff like that. And especially when you're going to, if you're going to need to borrow money from banks, they like to see all that regular income coming in and look at your accounts and see your profitability and underlying stuff. And you'll get to a point where you'll be speaking like back in the old days to a bank manager. I don't know if you have one now or not, or whatever, and they'll come in and they'll understand your business and where the issues are, but where the really good things are. And if you can show them that, then they like that. They banks are really risk adverse, generally speaking. So that they love that sort of stuff. Okay, brilliant. Well, I think we're kind of getting to the end of our time. Normally at the end, I have a kind of, so my medicine for you, but given that you're a sort of trained doctor, I feel like that's probably not the right phrase to use. But I suppose my advice would be to try and go after those acquisitions, maybe get the small ones, but definitely really have that goal of getting those bigger ones. That's really going to accelerate your business and make the transitional period into those businesses a lot easier and really accelerate the growth. But you do need to make sure that the core values of those firms fit, because that's my experience, is that you can buy a fairly sizable business and they've got a completely different set of train tracks to your own firm. So that's your bigger challenge there. Try and spend more of your time business developing and less operating. If you can get to that kind of 80-20, that's always good. And spend those days hunting those people down on the company's house and keeping your ears to the ground and the rest of it. And then definitely with the cash flow stuff, I'd definitely look at that property setup where, you can use some of your retained profits to then buy those properties, and maybe not through the green group or even that, and then maybe lend some of the money back or whatever you might wish to do with that. But I do think working with the councils and stuff like that is a really stable way of not having rent arrears and a regular income. And then again, your serviced business, if you can package that up correctly, I think it's a really good model. So I mean, a lot of the guests, the ones that we've had, have come on here and they've got the issues, but I'm really excited for you, Tom, going forward. I think you got the skill set to acquire the big businesses and the right mindset, really. So I wish you all the luck with it, everything, and maybe we come on the podcast again in a year's time, see where you're at, and make sure you're on track.
Yeah, exactly. Hold me accountable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, indeed.
Accountability code.
Definitely. Do you have any other questions or anything you want to mention at all whilst we're here?
No, all good. We'll just say thank you very much for featuring me.
No problem at all. It's been a pleasure having you on. And as I say, come back in a year's time and we'll see where we're at with things. So,
All right, hopefully I've made leaps and bounds of progress.
Yes, get those acquisitions on the burn. They do tend to take a little while, I would say, and sometimes it's sowing seeds and they can be long-term stuff. So a lettings business that we are trying to purchase at the moment, we tried to buy their block management side. They then, a few years down the line, decided to sell their lettings business. They didn't sell their block management to us, but they've come back exclusively to us and said, we had a terrible time because we sold it to a big national firm and they've ruined all the clients and everyone's upset. But we like what you do. We've seen, like on your socials, we've seen the firm grow and the rest of it. We don't want to talk to anybody else, just you. And that is a seed that has been grown since like 2021. So, 3 years and they've come back and they're now only really looking exclusively to deal with us over this next bit of their kind of downsizing, exiting the market strategy. So, Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much again.
No problem at all. So it's nice and sunny outside and we've had a really good time in here with Tom today, and that was really interesting. I think that Tom needs to spend more time growing his business, and looking for those acquisitions would really be my key tip for him. If he doesn't move away from that, it's going to be really difficult. I think he's really got the skill set. I'm really excited for him. I think he's got what it takes to go off and do that. I do think that if he gets drawn back into the business, he does have a kind of this kind of, I don't know, like a temptation of the cash flow issues and the rest of it. So putting those service things in place to stop that becoming an issue and detracting from his goal of actually acquiring other firms, and really try and build that up so he's got much bigger firms interested in merging and acquiring with him. I think that's really his key. So I hope he really takes that away. It'd be really interesting to get Tom back on in the podcast in a year or two's time. See where he's moved to with the company, and hopefully he's managed to get some of those acquisitions and even out that cash flow so we don't get the peaks and troughs of business life. So if you want to come on the podcast and get some funky orange sunglasses, I don't know, it seems to become a thing now. We only bought them as a bit of a marketing gimmick, but everyone comes in here and asks for these funky orange sunglasses. We have some photos taken at the end, so a little gift from me to you. So, but if you do want to come on the podcast and have an open and frank chat with me about your business, where your goals are, what you think you can get out of it, and what your struggles are to reach those goals, please don't forget to email info@matthewcox.biz. That's Matthew with 2 T's as always. info@matthewcox.biz, and we will send you a form, fill that form in, and then we'll get you booked in on the podcast.